Populism in Europe getting stronger and more popular, but less populist, paradoxically. The terrorist state of Russia is getting ready to unleash its Russian terror in Europe. What's to expect? Ukraine faces a cash crunch, says The Economist, but not Ukraine and investors. This topic's in more detail in today's weekly wrap-up, with me, Henry Keane at UATV English, doing my best to break the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Far-right parties achieved notable success in Europe parliamentary elections, even though mainstream parties maintained a comfortable majority. So, what's up in Europe these days in easy terms? It might look as an occasion to celebrate for Moscow. We are talking about the progress made by far-right parties in France particularly and in Europe in general, but it does not come as a surprise. It only demonstrates the potential for Eurosceptic factions to exert greater influence on the direction of the European Union in the future. The election results appear to be accelerating an overall trend in the West of a backlash against globalism and resurgence of populism. Mark Hanna, a senior fellow at the New York-based Institute for Global Affairs, stated. The direction of European politics, as evident by the results, wasn't surprising, but the margins were, he added. What surprises me is that these margins and results surprise French, German and other European leaders, as the thing with far-rights always was they immediately become not that far and not that right as soon as they succeed and actually get to power. Well, take a look at Marine Le Pen, back then on the outskirts of French politics, and now. Just Google her speeches, metaphors and slogans and compare it to what she was saying recently, or better, wait a bit and compare to what she's going to actually do now. Analyzing her, you will surely be seeing a tendency to de-radicalization the closer she was getting to the Olympus. And that is also true for all populists. In Germany or France or anywhere else in this world, not because they all are the same, no, they are quite different to each other, but that magic wand of populism they used to cast a stunning spell on their constituents simply does not work after they got what they wanted: power. And if the history of populism teaches us anything, it is that when most rogue populists get to actual power, they get themselves to learn. It inevitably comes with actual responsibility, so they tend to change their respective ways and colors as a chameleon, if you like, and become more realistic in terms of laws and decisions they are going to produce. Because magic wands do not exist, and personal responsibility for failed promises does. The Kremlin began to use the tactics of the Islamic State, no less, now in Europe. Russia hires foreigners to do the dirty deed. For example, physically attacking Putin's opponents in exile, or to burn things, like, thank God, foiled arson in Prague. This was stated by the director of the Czech counterintelligence service BIS.
The fact that the traces of this attack lead to Russia is, of course, not just an assumption. There is intelligence behind it. Although, in general, the attacker himself in such cases may not even know that he was recruited by the Russian side. BIS Director Michał Kudelka.
Mr. Kudelka is talking about the Colombian citizen who tried to set fire to a bus depot in Prague and possible impacts of this act of terror on the elections that began that very day. Now, tell me honestly, what is it but in fact a tactic of the Islamic State, right? When people are recruited by the Kremlin through the internet to unleash terror. While Islamists try to use religion, the Russians act simply straightforward money and intelligence, of course. But the essence remains always the same: Russia is a terrorist state and will not stop unless stopped, and relevant steps are being taken.
Today, Mr. Speaker, in conjunction with my Right Honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, I am announcing a package of measures to make clear to Russia that we will not tolerate such apparent escalations. So I can tell the House that we will expel the Russian defence attaché, who is an undeclared military intelligence officer. We will remove diplomatic premises status from several Russian-owned properties in the UK, including Seacock's House, a Russian-owned property in Sussex, and the Trade and Defence section in Highgate, which we believe have been used for intelligence purposes.
Well, Russia has obviously set its course for terrorism in Europe, planning sabotage all throughout the continent, writes the Financial Times, citing sources in European intelligence services. According to journalists, Kremlin agents are preparing explosions, arsons and attacks on infrastructure despite the risk of civilian casualties. According to the publication sources, the Russians are ready to organize sabotage both independently and through proxy intermediaries, and they are ready to act more coordinated and aggressively than previous years. The head of the German Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, BfV, Bundesamt für Verfassungsschutz, Thomas Haldenwang, said that this agency addresses the risk of sabotage from Russia as significantly increased. At the conference in April, he said that Russian authorities were discussing operations with a high potential for harm to European countries, also bases, including the US Army garrison in Stuttgart, Germany, where the US European Command is headquartered, on Sunday raised their combat readiness level to the Charlie level, officials said. An American officer serving in Europe told CNN that they had not seen this level of threat for at least 10 years. He said, according to him, this usually means that the military has received an active and credible threat. Recently, the 26-year-old Russian was arrested in his hotel near Charles de Gaulle Airport on June 3rd after an accident while making explosives. He was planning to target a hardware store north of Paris as part of his sabotage campaign orchestrated by Moscow. Well, nothing of that really surprises me much. Go ask any terrorist you know. They always have a justification of their awful deeds by greater good cause. In case you don't have any fellow terrorists in your contact book, well, then just go ask any pro-Putin Russian living in Europe or America. That should do it just as well. The Economist forecasts evil. Ukraine faces a cash crunch, no less, says the publication. Let me quote the guys for you. For the past 2 years, Ukraine's creditors have agreed to suspend debt service payments. The let-off from both government and private lenders is worth 15% of GDP a year. If payments had been required, they would have been the state's second biggest expenditure behind defense. Now, though, the moratorium from private bondholders, including Amundi, a French asset manager, and PIMCO, an American one, is set to expire on August 1st. All that is true, and then the Economist just jumps to a conclusion. Therefore, says the publication, Ukraine has a month to avoid default. The IMF is keen for Ukraine to negotiate a write-down, but a deal seems unlikely. They say in the time available, if Ukraine does default, then it will reflect, I quote, a troubling lack of faith among private investors concerning the West's commitment. In the long run, that could spell disaster for the country's recovery. End of quote. Well, my question to The Economist is, seriously? When was the last time your expert in many things walked out of the office into reality to see how these very things work in real life? Do you really need to be The Economist to produce the banality like lack of faith could ruin things in the long run? Well, thank you, Captain Obvious, The Economist. And how about the fact that in the long run, Russian invasion not only could, but undoubtedly will spell disaster on everything that Amundi, PIMCO, IMF taken together invested in Ukraine. Here's one more brilliantly obvious risk-hedging idea for all the investors in the world. Want your investments in Ukraine to be safe and prosper? Stand for Ukraine in this war till it ends with just and long-lasting peace. Then enjoy your margins. The IMF expects Ukraine's GDP to grow by 3.5% in 2024. In March, the fund forecast growth of 3.4%. The 2025 forecast worsened to 5%, meaning down from 5.5%. But we are talking about growth anyway. And the same very International Monetary Fund has approved the allocation of a tranche of $2.2 billion to support the state budget of Ukraine. Even The Economist admits, however, that the sums that allies provide are impressive, but come in the form of artillery, tanks, and earmarked funds rather than cash. Only $8 billion of America's recent package will go directly to Ukraine's government, an amount equivalent to just over a quarter of Ukraine's annual spending on social benefits, and even this in the form of loan. This is exactly what I like about all our common human values. We loan you tanks to fight off the enemy that endangers this very loan. But let us call it a fight for freedom when we are on TV. Well, don't get me wrong, I am well aware of the fact freedom costs. Just please remember that while international creditors were not too eager to cut their repayment expectations to 60%, as our finance minister Marchenko offered, and in turn offered to cut at only 22%, these remaining 38% indeed costs cash to creditors and blood to Ukraine. So while The Economist talks about possible default in Ukraine, in a month's time we defend human values and freedoms from imperial ambitions of the Kremlin for more than 2.5 years in a row. So to make sure in the future The Economist does not have to write about how expensive caskets for American soldiers are. So dear The Economists of the world and other writers about wars and expenditures, mark my words, Ukraine will most certainly pay all its debts. Just let us survive first. While some talk about things, some do things. The difference is crucial in terms of actual on-the-ground knowledge. You can be writing for The Economist, but that does not make you The Economist. So we decided to have a small talk on big things like economy and investments during a wartime with someone who really knows it all on their own personal experience. Interview on UATV English. Tonight's guest is unusual, though. Deborah Fair Lam, Green Flag Ventures, founding partner. Believe it or not, these people are investing in Ukraine these days and for the last decade or so. Is that right, Deborah? Hello.
Hello, thank you for having me. And yes, I have been in Ukraine for more than a decade, much of that time focused on helping people understand and find different opportunities to invest in Ukraine.
Why Ukraine?
Right now, well, originally it was because I married a Ukrainian. And so that was my first entry over to the country. But once we had moved over here, it was, for me, just an extraordinary opportunity in terms of where the country was in its growth curve and everything that you can sort of see that lays ahead of it in terms of how it will continue to grow and to build. And so for me, that's what the interest has been, is just watching all of this unfold and taking part in it.
Well, it seems to me that Deborah Fair Lam actually wears a lot of hats, not just founding partner of Green Ventures. Get acquainted us to yourself. Who are you? Why? I mean, being here in Ukraine for more than a decade. Mm-hmm. Is it hard?
No, actually, I'll tell you the truth. It is very easy. And for me, there was a time at the beginning of the war where I was out of the country because of some of the work that I was doing at the time. And the time that I spent outside of Ukraine was far, far more stressful for me than the time I had been in the country. And so I consider this my home at this point, and I love what I'm doing.
Green Flag Ventures, not adventures. So you guys like implying that you know what you are doing. So what are you doing? What actually are the benefits for foreign investors, for international investors, to say the truth, to be investing in Ukraine right now?
So there are different categories of investors. So there are people who invest in foreign direct investment, which means they are building their own companies here in Ukraine, and there's plenty of that going on. What we are doing is called equity investing, and so we take we work with limited partners in the United States and pool the money, and what we are doing and what we are focusing on is investing in Ukrainian-founded technology companies, specifically focused in 3 areas. One is dual-use technology. That means that it has applicability both out on the front, but that these products that these people are developing also have applicability in the commercial market outside of Ukraine longer term. And we are also looking at companies that are doing very interesting work within AI as well as within cybersecurity.
Military and defense. Do you invest in this?
That's very much what dual-use technology is. There's a lot of really interesting discussion around this right now because, you know,
that's the reason why I asked.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that question. It's a really good.
Are you allowed to talk about that even?
Of course, no, absolutely.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if you look traditionally, there were a lot, especially at like the institutional investor level, there are certain types of sectors, I will call them, that people would not normally invest in. It used to be, you know, as alcohol, gambling, anything with pornography, and defense and weapons has long been one of those. And that's still true for many investors. But one of the things that's happening now is that, especially since the invasion started and the Ukrainians have really sort of kicked their technology development into high gear in terms of defense of the country.
Indeed.
You are now seeing all of these small companies that you would not normally ever associate with defense. You'd normally think of Northrop Grumman, BAE in the UK.
Right.
But what is happening is there is now this whole new category of companies that are developing products that are absolutely used for defense. Not all of them are weapons. We are looking at very interesting companies that do communication, that do navigation systems. So it's not just the lethal, non-lethal conversation.
Yeah.
So yes, there are a tremendous amount of opportunities that are out there. Just like with anything, you as an investor, you need to look through and evaluate the company for its strength of the team and the product and the usage and the potential growth. But we are very excited about what we are seeing here in Ukraine, and we expect that longer term it's going to continue, because even once this current the war ends, or that there is some sort of a stop with this, Ukraine's defense sector is going to be crucially important for its growth going forward, because it is always going to have Russia as a partner.
I hope so.
So all of this technology will add to that.
Well, are we talking here about international investors here, or do you accept?
Absolutely.
What about domestic investors? Do you accept it into your portfolio, or do you have ones maybe already?
We would, but we have actually not gone after any domestic investors. So it's important to explain. That's a great question. So our fund is actually based out of the United States. Most of our co-investors right now are Americans or Canadians. We would be very happy to have somebody from other countries invest through. In conjunction with us for what we are doing here. So there's not limits on that.
No limits on that. And Ukrainian company can be investing in Ukraine through means of your fund just as well.
So a Ukrainian investor, certainly they could if they would like to. One of the benefits that we sort of offer that is a little bit unique is with us being on the ground, it's different.
I got it.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. Well, let's pretend I'm an investor. Say a thick one, a big one, whatever, million, a billionaire. Can you try to engage me in that thing? Can you try to convince me that I need to invest in Ukraine right now, because the country is going through an existential war, let's be honest with that.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
So that's actually such a good question. Not many people have ever asked me that. So one of the really important things is that when you are trying to get somebody to invest in, so in my case, if we are trying to get others to invest alongside of us, it is not about me selling them. It is about me understanding what is it that your goals are. What do you want your money to do? Are you looking purely for return? Are you looking for return on investment, but that actually may have some kind of an impact? Are you looking to make a social statement with your investment? So all of these things matter.
Social statement.
Absolutely. People,
so there are investors who are looking for social statement.
Absolutely. In fact, ESG, so what does ESG stand for? I forget what it is. There are whole categories of investments that are really focused on, cultural awareness, or on diversity, or on saving the climate, that kind of thing. So yes, it's absolutely a consideration.
Okay. Funding partner. There are a lot of partners, founding partners, or just?
There's just two of us, actually.
Two?
So, yep.
All right.
Yep. My partner is a gentleman named Justin Zief, and he is actually based in Los Angeles, and I am based here in Kiev.
Say hello for me.
Hi, Justin.
Right. What are the plans?
So what we are doing is raising a $20 million fund. We actually believe that this will be just the first fund. We see opportunities for additional funds going forward. But it's a $20 million fund.
Is it sort of a hedge fund, or?
No, a hedge fund generally means you're investing in sort of opposing asset classes. It's opposing to, and what you're looking for is the balanced middle ground. We are very clearly looking for Ukrainian-founded companies.
Oh, okay.
So that is our main thesis hinge. Has to be Ukrainian-founded, but we are looking for companies in the dual-use space, AI, or cybersecurity. We are quite confident that Ukraine has a lot, not of just interesting companies that are doing important things right now, but that there is a very clear growth trajectory for them going forward.
I wanted to ask, what are the benefits? Let me go more straightforward. What are the margins?
In a fund or an individual investment?
Yeah, let's say individual investment. If I have an amount, what is the minimum amount? I don't know. I have no idea. But if I want to invest, my return on if I say I'm not interested in any social statement, purely return.
So,
I'm a
okay.
greedy bastard and I want to have profit. What can I get?
So within there's kind of a couple rules of thumb within venture capital investing. So it is definitely one of the more riskier asset classes because you are by nature investing in startups which are early stage and the sort of sometimes the hardest to predict the growth. So what you look for when you're investing is something, it's a combination. It's a really unique product. It's a strong team that can go the distance to build. It's where is the overall market trends going? Is there going to be a need for defense tech going forward? And we think absolutely. Rough estimate is a 10x return is what kind of the portfolio looks for. Ideally it can be more. So a lot of them don't. A lot of them don't 10x return, and so that's an optimal solution or an optimal number that you're looking at. But in terms of when you are putting money in a riskier asset class, the expectation is that potential rewards are larger, towards the end. I will also say it's a long return. This is not 2 years. Generally, the life of a fund can be anywhere from 7 to 10 years.
7 to 10 years.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, what is the cybersecurity? I just love to talk about that. Do you?
You should. Everybody should be paying attention to cybersecurity.
That's why you're here. All right. Can you educate me? I have no idea what is it, and how. All right, I have a rough idea what it is.
Yep.
But how to invest in it? How to be a part of it? What do I do?
Yeah. So first and foremost about cybersecurity is make sure you practice your own good, clean cybersecurity. So make sure you have firewalls, you have virus protection, all of those things. Don't click on links that you don't know. Cyber has actually been a really, I'll call it big parallel part of this war and the Russian aggression against Ukraine that is not talked about quite as much, but it has been a huge parallel attack that the Russians have been doing. And it started from even before the war started. I don't know if you remember, but there were attacks on several of the ministries, several of the banks.
I do remember.
There was a very big attack on the internet, the telecoms systems, with the hopes that the communication would go down in Ukraine before the war started. That was all cyber attacks. So that has been going on in parallel this entire time.
Right. So you are helping Green Flag Ventures is helping to invest in teams that are in Ukrainian teams or IT teams that are doing what, or it's hardware, or it's both.
It can be both. It can be both.
Right.
So what we look for is we invest in registered companies. They have to be a formed company. It has to have a registration both in Ukraine as well as outside. But within the context of cybersecurity, it tends to be all digital, so it's a little bit hard to call it a product, but there are products that are there. But a lot of what these are different ways, sort of different products that can be used largely in defense of external and potential attacks.
Ryn Metal auf Deutsch.
Yes.
So this is a good sign if someone as big as Ryn Metal is opening a mill or a factory here in Ukraine, isn't it not?
It is, and I think they've actually announced that there's even going to be a second facility that's coming in already. So it is. So it's very important for a couple of reasons. One, they will help the Ukrainians be able to repair and get things back out to the front more quickly. So for current, it's very important. Second thing is these guys are not doing this philanthropically. They are absolutely looking for a business and
social statement.
No social statement.
Okay.
They are a publicly traded corporation, so so they obviously see some kind of a business case for going forward. And again, I think this goes back to what I said a few moments ago, that Ukraine is going to have a very robust and very diverse defense sector when this ends, because it is. Again, the Russians are not going to be leaving, and Ukraine is going to make sure that it is prepared going forward. Honestly, as a parallel, what you can think about is Israel. Israel, is actually a great parallel in many ways.
There's one thing about you, tiny beautiful lady living in a country at war, at the existential war, running an investment fund. Are you not afraid? I mean, you can be doing the same thing being in the United States or wherever in the world and just have your people here on the ground, but you're not leaving.
No, I'm here.
Why?
I am not afraid. I am aware of the dangers. I listen to the air alerts. I follow everything on the news. I really do understand, what it means to have the Russians sweep through a town. I had friends who were up north of Kiev before this happened, so I am not ignorant or unaware. But I do believe in my ability to assess risk at any given point in time, and that includes for my own personal safety. And I firmly believe that what is happening in Ukraine is so important that I would like to be here and to be part of it, to do what I can to support Ukraine, both in terms of investing, but also just through my networks of friends and showing that there are people who are willing to be here with Ukraine. And I'm not the only foreigner. There are literally thousands of people who are here right now who would come as volunteers, who felt the call. You had mentioned this. There is something literally, this is a very big turning point for where the world is going to be heading in many ways in terms of, do you stand up for international rule of law, or are you going to sort of step aside and let the rules that have governed our world in relatively peaceful situations since the end of World War II, or are we going to let this sort of change going forward? And so just at a very basic level, what is happening in Ukraine is critically important, not just for Ukraine, but for everybody else as well.
Well, that was a lovely social statement from investor. Deborah, thank you so very much.
You're very welcome.
First of all, thank you so very much for your time and for your expertise with us here. And from the bottom of my heart, and I believe from the bottom of the big Ukrainian nation, from the big heart, thank you for being here, for being with us and staying on the right side. I know it's not easy, but as Stephen Moore puts it, he said he believes that the core human value is freedom.
It is. I agree with that entirely.
Well, that is an investment.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
That was it for tonight's episode and for the week. Just by the way, for news from Ukraine, stay with Ukraine. UATV English is going to break hard truth to easy terms for you as usual. Please subscribe, like, comment. Your voice matters as it helps Ukrainian voice to be heard globally. Stay safe and tune for more news, updates and interviews already next week on UATV English. Goodbye.